I'm done with New Zelda. What does that mean? It occurred to me that we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the launch of Tears of the Kingdom, The Legend of Zelda, latest entry for Nintendo Switch. And I realized that in the first month after Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out, I put more time into that game and finished that game than I have into Tears of the Kingdom in the last year that the game has been out. And I had to ask myself why, because Tears of the Kingdom is good, isn't it? It isn't? I don't know. What I do know is that it's the first Legend of Zelda game that I haven't finished and really don't feel compelled to finish in any respect. And that's weird because there's a reason I bring up Final Fantasy. These were my two staple series throughout my childhood and early adulthood that were the go-to games that when these came out, you absolutely knew you were getting a certified banger. And the Final Fantasy series definitely fell off at a certain point around the late 2000s, 2010s, that wasn't a guarantee anymore, but Zelda still kind of stuck through it for me. And then Breath of the Wild came out and it was an amazing game. There were a lot of things about Breath of the Wild that lacked any sort of satisfying payoff, but mostly I saw the potential of, like, if they just keep layering on more to what this game has to offer, I can see this being the foundation for something truly amazing. And I realized that I'm ready to be done with the whole Breath-like experience. And after Tears of the Kingdom, I'm especially ready to be done with it. For sure. I want another revolution in the series and not just more of repackaging this exact same gameplay style. So let's talk about why. And before I get into the why, I just want to quickly say some great things about Tears of the Kingdom so that you know I'm not here being a hater-ass bitch the whole time. The world is massive and there's a lot to do, sure. And I found that Tears of the Kingdom has a much better, more compelling storyline than Breath of the Wild did. Now, it is a story that takes place in the background in most respects. It's stories told through vignettes of the past. And then when you're experiencing the moment-to-moment story out in the world, it's not terribly the most interesting thing ever. And going to each guardian and recruiting them and their little quest lines to go to the big old shrine to fix whatever their problem is, those weren't terribly compelling either. They kind of fall into the same basket of you're a descendant of a sage and you get your secret stone, you get powered up. But that's pretty normal for a Zelda game. I mean, we've had the collect the sages forever, so I'm not going to dog that. I found the flashbacks and the eventual reveal of Tears of the Kingdom to be amazing and much, much better than the lack of any sort of satisfying payoff of really anything in Breath of the Wild. Like, you could skip all of Breath of the Wild story and be completely fine for it, in my opinion. So I'll say Tears of the Kingdom definitely improved upon that. But what I've realized coming to the end of Tears of the Kingdom, I've done about 90% of the shrines. I've seen most every landmark on the map, and yet I just haven't finished the game because I really don't feel a drive to finish everything up and see the ending, which is so weird for a Zelda game for me. And the reason for that is nearly anything I do in the game has any sort of satisfying reward or feeling like the time investment I'm putting into the game is paying off and growing my character or my experience or my capabilities in a way that is really meaningful for me. And that's what I really want to delve into, among other issues. So let's get into that. Point number one, the new gameplay loop I find super tedious and kind of boring. So fusing, that is the new thing that comes to Tears of the Kingdom. That is what sets it apart from Breath of the Wild. And they've incentivized you to use it by making everything else in the game nearly complete dog shit. So all of the weapons are deprecated and destroyed, and you've lost some of the capabilities of your magic tablet that you used to have. You can't really create things with it anymore. It's more just to either move yourself or move other things or glue things together. So that's the fuse ability. And there's a lot of different ways that can be done. Now, on my very first stream of the launch day of this game, I was so happy with Fuse. My mind was swimming with all the fun, wacky things I was going to be able to do by fusing things to weapons and so on, resulting in crazy combat scenarios. Okay, so boulders. Okay. Bam. Shit. Okay. I'm gonna make a board sword. Board sword. Board stick. Get slapped. Slap Lord. I'm gonna just put it out there right now. I'm gonna just come out and say it. I'm gonna be controversial. I'm already enjoying this game more than Breath of the Wild. I think early on, I got a board and I fused it to a stick and I was just whacking people with this giant board. And so my brain was alight with possibilities of what that could entail. And there are some fun things like putting the springboard onto a weapon and chucking people across the map, or explosives on your shields, etc., etc. There's some fun little cute combos, but for me, fusing consistently gets in the way of my gameplay because it was made into this integral part of everything you have to do. And so I can't just goof off by putting that board on a sword because it's going to be weak and I'm coming up against strong enemies. So I can't just goof around and experiment in the game anymore because I need damage modifiers. And because every weapon in the game is weak, you need to use fuse as a means to upgrade those weapons. You can't go find a pretty strong weapon and then fuse something goofy in it and have the best of both worlds, at least in my experience. Now, if other people have come up with combos that work really well in this respect, I wouldn't know because I don't really engage in gaming YouTube as a means to supplement my ability to play a game. I choose to let games teach me how to play them or immerse me in them themselves. And maybe after I finish a game, I might go look up some additional strategies or silly things to do. For the most part, Tears of the Kingdom, what it's telling me to do is stop goofing around, find strong items, fuse them to weapons to make the shitty weapons better, right? That is the path I was being pushed down very early in the game. And I found that really unsatisfying because I was no longer experimenting or goofing around or having the fun that was initially introduced to me in the first place. And so pretty early in the game too, they had me finding the silver enemies, the silver bokoblins, the silver moblins and things. Comparatively to the amount of hours I've put in the game, I'm finding these enemies very early. So again, not really having an ability to screw around, otherwise you were going to die. And so goof off mode was over early. Either fuse strong items or you're screwed. Beyond that, you can use fusing to create like carts with weapons on them, do crazy things, build robots, but that all costs resources and things that frankly create more chores and stopping points between me and playing the game. So if I encounter a camp of enemies, I'm now not just thinking of like the skill and the time it takes to beat these enemies. I'm thinking, how much of my resources am I going to chew through to fight these enemies? And I find myself avoiding fights because of that reason of, you know, I don't want to drop a flamethrower cart and the zoanite or whatever resources I'm going to need to produce this. I don't want to go through all the trouble to do that just to beat some damage sponge enemies that in any other Zelda game, I would just approach them and beat the crap out of them because it's fun to, right? In other Zeldas, when I see enemies, I want to fight them, especially games where they tightened up combat even further in the 3D realm of like Wind Waker with the like dodge mechanics and timing and everything. Twilight Princess having more moves you learn throughout the course of the game. Those were pretty fun to me to have combat expanded. Skyward Sword was his own weird, crazy thing with the Wiimote that half worked, right? But combat was something I never shied away from in any of those games because it wasn't asking me to deplete a limited resource I have to engage it. Contrast this with the game Ghosts of Tsushima, which has really satisfying combat, where every time I am running across the world on my horse in that game and I see enemies patrolling the streets, I hop off that horse because I want to fight them. I want the satisfaction of like cleaning up my world and ridding it of these villains because it's just so fun and satisfying to do it. And I don't have to make this brain calculation of, well, what am I losing by doing this? Now, that is a core tenet of what the Breath-like Zelda series is doing, and it is interesting early game, but it becomes this endless thing of you're still doing the same loop at the end of the game that you were doing in the beginning of it, just scaling. So enemies are getting stronger and your weapons are getting stronger. You're still chewing through your weapons, you're still chewing through your resources, and it's not ever really getting more convenient or more manageable for the amount of time you're putting into the game, at least in my experience. Yes, I have dozens and dozens of shock horse helms that I can drop and deploy to it, but that's just another chore, and it's more automation and weird gamey elements than me just doing combat with an enemy. Personal opinion, let me know what you think on that matter. If there's a way that you've found to make combat much more satisfying to the point where you always want to do it, I would love to hear that. Also, I just find the combat in the both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom a little bit more stiff and unresponsive than past entries, where like the dodge timing window is a little goofy for me, where I never really know where it is, where I was just playing Stellar Blade and the dodge timing window in that game is, I instantly knew it. The first time I interacted with the demo, I saw an attack coming towards me, I pressed the button, I dodged.
All right, let's look at this. This is going to be important for a future video. Let's watch the perfect dodge. The swing happens, and if you dodge right as the weapon is about to hit you, you get the perfect dodge. Now, in a future video, I'm going to comment about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's perfect dodge, which is not about visibly watching the screen and avoiding the item, but instead predicting an AI's attack pattern. Boom, baby! That is, I'm going to keep this footage near and dear to my heart when creating my Zelda video. Thank the Lord.
That's just how it went. And Zelda is not like that. I never really know whether I'm landing a good time dodge. Seems like a downgrade from past Zelda games where the enemies had very tight, considered loops that you were learning about them and then deploying your methods to take care of it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. It feels like I'm less looking at the screen, reading my enemy's movements, and more making like a brain calculation of what is the game doing under the hood and how do I need to respond to what the game is thinking and what the game is doing, rather than just looking at an enemy that feels real, feels mortal in a way. I don't know how to explain it. Combat feels off to me in certain respects. And I know what you'll say, but Nate, you can go online and find people doing crazy stuff. But yeah, like I said, I don't watch videos and train myself via YouTube. I like the game to immerse me and to teach me how to play it via that and to be able to experiment. And I have done a lot of experimenting in Zelda, and I haven't really found my tried and true combat flow, especially in Tears of the Kingdom, whereas it was a little less cumbersome to engage in combat in Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, if you pick up a sword, you can then go start attacking that enemy with that sword. There's an added layer of something you need to do with each weapon you get, which is fuse it with something valuable or strong in Tears of the Kingdom. So you're not just grabbing and going. You have to do a chore with each addition of a weapon or something you pick up, right? And often, if you're trying to do those mid-combat, it can get a little frustrating, like targeting or fusing in the correct means that you want to, but I don't know. So what else is part of the gameplay loop? Well, we have the dungeons and shrines. And for me, Tears of the Kingdom shrines are a huge downgrade from the previous game. They're almost all super easy and not very enjoyable to me, even more so than Breath of the Wild. And it's because in Tears of the Kingdom, there's just tons of shrines that boil down to fusing parts laying out right in front of you and then watching environment do stuff. So like there'll be a shrine that says that you just look at it and it's, you instinctively already know, knock the ball into the hole, right? And so there's like an arm and there's a board sitting over here. All right, put them, and then you hit the ball, yay, whatever. And so, oh, okay, I fused it together and it knocked it too far. Whoops, I guess I gotta make the board a little shorter. And now I hit it. Okay, yay, I won. I got it in. And so there's no real skill involved in it. There's no like you hitting a ball with timing or force or calculation of you, the player, doing these things or pressing the buttons in a skillful way. It's a trial and error test of you fuse it, you were wrong, fuse it again. Okay, this time you were right. Yay, whoop-de-doo. So that's kind of annoying to me, and it's rinse and repeat for a lot of shrines. I just did one that will be on camera here that was really just fusing a board to a ramp to run up the ramp. Like the simplest, stupidest thing ever. And there's nothing it's really teaching me or any complexities of the fuse system or the game's physics, or just like there's no brain busting crazy things I can do. And that's pretty much the case for all of them, in my opinion. Now, the dungeons are a little bit better. They're a little bit more immersive and thematic. And I definitely like the sky one with the boats and the flying, because it's like that took it way out of the realm of having to fuse and do gimmicks and put the control on me controlling my character and me doing interesting things with my character most of the time. Now, when you get up to the final boat, every dungeon has this like unlock 4 or 5 things component to it, and each of those 4 or 5 things are again like a mini shrine. They're incredibly simple, and the parts that you need will just be laying right in front of you in your face. Like in the Gerudo one, there will be piles of sand, but you'll also just see a fan right there. So you don't have this thought process of like, oh man, how do I clear sand? It's you clear sand by the fan. You don't even think about it, right? And the Zora one, you're cleaning up goo with water. In my opinion, this Spirit Temple was the absolute worst of them. Like I spent minutes building a big dumb car that I drove for 12 seconds. And that's indicative of more of a problem I have with fusing as well, is the amount of time I spend making things to the amount of time I spend using things. Now, there is an ability to, if you make something you really like, you can save it and just reprint it later, which is good. I will give it that credit. But there's a lot of like little treasure chests and caves and doohickeys to do out in the world where they give you the parts and they say, oh, look, you can make this thing. And it's like, I will use that thing for all of 10 seconds to get what I need. I'll literally spend more time finicking with getting the vehicle right than actually using the vehicle. And then there's like everyone who's played the game knows there's these multiple cases where you will have the board lined up with the tire and it's showing that it's going in the right place. And as soon as you hit the button, they contort to have it in the wrong place at the wrong angle. So frustrating, almost to the point where it's like they could have just created a separate UI where you tag a bunch of the parts you want and then you go just build it in a little like mind space or something where you can be much more precise than having to do it in the open world with the physics of the open world. Just my opinion, whatever. But I think when I take inventory of all of the game's puzzles and challenges, it really comes down to like, I feel like I'm playing Blue's Clues, the game, the show from when I was a child, where there's the person staring at me through the screen going, hey, do you see that pile of parts on the ground? You do? Connect the wheel to the rectangle. Wow, you made a car. You're so smart. Like, that is what I feel like playing this game, that the challenges of the game boil down to something a child is supposed to do. And it makes me feel like maybe this game was made for children. Maybe I'm the idiot, being the 37-year-old still playing Nintendo games. I don't know. I was under the impression that, you know, this hobby's for everyone of all ages, yet I feel stupid playing these games for how they treat me sometimes, of offering no real puzzles, so to speak. The puzzle is, can you build Legos? Like, and not, we've all seen some crazy Lego sets. Can you build a Lego set of 6 pieces, right? Well, then you've solved the game. And it's always right in front of your face. There's no real, like, oh, there are 17 different ways to solve this challenge. There are in some cases. I remember one shrine where I had to hit a gong with a specific item, and I just fused that item to a stick and threw the stick at the gong instead of going through all the BS. So they do have those slight moments, but I feel like more like I'm cheating than I'm coming up with an incredibly wise and creative solution when I do that. It also makes the game feel dumb that they didn't think of me doing that. Whatever. So that's why I find the gameplay loop really unsatisfying in comparison to past Zelda games. The combat I don't feel is as good and has more hurdles to hop through to really get to fun combat. And then the dungeons, shrines, all of those experiences, the puzzles and challenges and mazes that are being set before me are not really interesting in the slightest. Now, my second point of why I find the game to be unsatisfying is it really doesn't have a clue on how to reward me with anything. I've done so many things in Tears of the Kingdom that just have unsatisfying or outright pointless rewards. You go through the effort of creating a plane to get to a floating platform you see off in the distance with like a small little crevice to land the plane in, and you're thinking, wow, it's going to take my skills to get this in there. And so I build a plane, and because I need a little bit of extra energy, I might toss a big battery on the back of the plane so we can get all the way there. Great, cool. Get there, open the chest, here's a big battery. The one that you used to fucking get in here, meaning this was a waste of my time. There's so many places in the game where the rewards are basically useless because you can just go to a gacha machine and pump one of your 200 sparks in there and get them no effort. So why put the Zonite items in treasure chests all across the world as well when I can just go buy them myself, like crazy amounts of it myself for very cheap? Doesn't know how to reward me. I'd say 90% of any chests or anything you will open in the game will have useless garbage, weapons you won't want that will be downgrades than what's in your inventory, bows that you can't fit, shields that you are weak. Just, you will have no use for 90% of the things you pick up in a treasure chest, to where opening a treasure chest is no longer satisfying. A core tenet of the genre now made a joke, right? Of opening treasure chests. That old da-na-na-na. Nope, not fun. But Nate, you don't have to do everything. The joy in solving a puzzle is just doing it, not the loot. And in this game's case, the joy often isn't doing the puzzle. I would agree with you if you told me that the joy is in doing the puzzle, not necessarily the reward, the journey, not the destination. But again, as I've outlined in my earlier point about the gameplay loop, a lot of these puzzles aren't interesting or enjoyable to do. So no, I'm not really having fun doing the minuscule little challenges it's proposing. Alternative to this, playing the game Queen's Blood in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the card game, that is the joy. I did all of them without care for what the reward was or whether I wanted the card they were giving. I was swimming in gold saucer points and still shot for the highest point reward in the ultimate 5-round Queen's Blood game because solving the puzzle was fun. That's it. It's the only reason I did it, was because the puzzle of that card game was fun. And I wanted Zelda's puzzles to be fun. The way I don't know if I'm just getting older, but the way they were back in the day, there's a satisfaction to joining up all the disparate elements of a Zelda puzzle or dungeon from the old game. And I'm not really feeling that in any of Tears of the Kingdom's puzzles. Maybe a handful of times in hundreds of hours of gameplay. And that's really crazy to me. And yet I'm a completionist, so I want to see everything. I want to do everything. I want to get my money's worth out of this game, find items or parts I will never touch in any capacity, just because I want to say that I did it. And you know, this might sound like I'm just complaining for the sake of complaining, like, oh, the game doesn't know how to reward you. Well, what would you do differently? Well, I have tons of ideas of things that I would find valuable to be finding in treasure chests throughout this game. And I'll give you some of those as an example. Now, here's an item idea. Dragon Tears. This is going to be a little bit of a spoiler to think about, but you remember all those crashed sky chunks that are guarded by Zonai containing something special that the said bots have found and are guarding and maybe collected over the millennia? Let's say in each of one of these crash sites, there is a tier of a certain dragon that's flying around, maybe even a golden tier of some kind. I know that's also used by Elden Ring, so we'd have to name it something different. But let's see, maybe there's 150 crash sites around the map. What would they do? Well, with 150 of them, we could increase your Master Sword's damage, durability, recharge speed by, I don't know, double over the course of the game by using these. You'd put 50 points into each subject as far as your sword goes. And you can still fuse stuff to it to make it stronger, but why would this currency be important? Well, it would make me more likely, as I mentioned earlier, to get into those fights where I don't have to worry about tearing through my non-renewable resources, because progressively over the course of the game, I am building up a strong renewable resource that is meaningful to me in the form of the Master Sword. Now, it blows my mind that for the last 2 Zelda games now, the Master Sword is absolute dog shit. It's frustrating that you use it for all of 10 seconds and it's gone. Like, this was the thing we all looked forward to in past Zelda games. And maybe we're past that. Maybe we're trying to do something new here. I would really love to see the Master Sword restored to its glory, to be the thing that once you got it, you were set to vanquish evil. Like, it was just so cool. But I don't know, it would, making it more renewable, stronger to compete with some late games items. I mean, and I'm talking spending dozens of hours making this thing stronger, not just something that's handed to you that will invalidate an element of the game. The more you play, the more you hunt, the more you power this thing up, it's going to be worth it to seek out these sites, right? In addition, my own little flavory thing I'd throw in there. If you know the story of how the sword is reforged, there's like these shiny etching marks where Zelda fixed the sword from its destruction at the beginning of the game. For the slightest moment, I thought they were glowing gold, and I thought to myself, what if you fully repowered the sword and it became the golden Master Sword from A Link to the Past? It would fit thematically with her gathering this energy and reforging the sword and using her tears, her life force to fully re-empower the thing, and it would transform into that form we haven't seen in many games. But it'd be a nice little reference of old while also having a very diegetic, meaningful progression in the game itself. The stronger that glow is, the more badass you know that sword is. I'd like that. And it would mean that I wouldn't engage in combat more readily each time. I think Sage's Wills could use a revamp of, there could be more of them to find out in the world. And I know people hate talent trees or, you know, skill trees in games or whatever, but I think the sages could greatly benefit from them, because really, when it just says that they're going to make your sage stronger, I didn't notice a notable difference in them at all. And I was like, wait, what did that even do? To the point where I did have to look that up to see, how did my sage change at all? So there's a lot of things you could enhance about them. You could enhance their damage they do, their cooldown speed on their abilities. You could give them different abilities, or like team up attacks with links or things they do, almost like the way the lightning chick does. You know, I find that they are kind of weak and get mostly annoying in endgame. They're cool to have around in the beginning of the game, but they kind of get invalidated in that their damage is so low. Even the ones I've upgraded are just kind of weak. And so being able to do something satisfying with them would again mean I'm traversing the world, running around, ready to get into fights, ready to throw down, ready to go crazy, because I've got these people on my side, and they're enhanced in a way that I understand what's better about them. I understand the meaningful changes they've gone through, and I feel like that's an investment I've made. So when I see them do something cool, that now belongs to me, not just some AI doing its thing off in the corner, right? I also think that the Zoanite fabricator, or whatever you want to call it, the thing that builds stuff using Zoanite for you, even if you don't have the parts on hand, could be upgraded progressively more and more to use less materials when building. Because granted, I don't want early game building giant robots to be the de facto way to beat the game. So yeah, they should kind of block you off from just farming a crap load of Zoanite and then cheesing through everything a little bit more than they do now. But as the game progresses further and further, you're running out of things that you necessarily need to do, and you're finding more things to just screw around and have fun with. Let me experiment with Zoanite. Instead of building a giant robot that I've saved in my thing, taking 30, 40, 50 pieces, let me upgrade the Zoanite thing to, well, now it only takes 25. Now it only takes 10. And I can just build crazy stuff without a care. You know, that might be game breaking, but after I've put 100 hours into the game, how are we going to incentivize me screwing around, having a little bit more fun anyway? That would be something perfect to collect to make it easier and easier to keep experimenting after you've kind of gone through the standard list of creations. Now, a game like Death Stranding, love it or hate it, the walking simulator, if you hate it, that's fine. I totally understand that. But I will give it credit for one thing it does amazingly well. After you've digested a mechanic or an area or some sort of gameplay element that it presents, such as, let's say you've just beaten the snowy traversal area of mountains, you've trudged through there, you've been in the cold, you had to take breaks, you had to regain your energy, you had to sit down, it was hell. Well, once you've finished all that content, you're now going to get a recipe for snow boots to make that less hell. And you're going to get zip lines that start unlocking to just ride past that. And I've heard people like Donkey mention, oh, well, you can just skip the game now. No, you conquered that part of the game. And so now you get to build something that makes that part a little bit easier. That is the game, is progressing to a point where you're stronger and more capable. And I feel like the things I've proposed about being able to build better, having a stronger primary weapon, having stronger allies, that would be all part and parcel with that experience of when I get to the end of the game, I not only just have more armor and more health, those are kind of the most boring upgrades you can do in any RPG is make the numbers bigger, make my numbers bigger, make my enemies' numbers smaller, make me able to do more things. And I feel like after the first 15, 20 hours of the game of getting your companions and getting kind of your tool set down, there isn't a whole lot of growth to do in the preceding 80 hours of screwing around. Like, I don't know why I haven't finished the game and just put it aside. I had this faith that doing everything would be satisfying, and I'm continually being disappointed in that regard. So I think having more interesting rewards, knowing how to reward me, would provide that level of satisfaction. Beyond that, the game has a lot of currencies that progressively make them less desirable as you get them. So like Booble Gems or Korok Seeds are attractive when you first get them because it takes 1, 4, 10 to unlock something. So you're getting unlocks. But if you think about it, if it starts taking more and more and more to do something meaningful, if an unlock takes 30 Korok Seeds, then that means every time you see a Korok out in the wild and you find them, it's less satisfying to go through the effort to do that. And so that little yaha moment means less and less the more you do it. I find that to be incredibly unsatisfying to the point where a lot of these Koroks, because there's hundreds and hundreds of them around, are just like a chore. Like I'm going up and I'm picking up rocks just to check if there's a Korok under them, or I'm, knocking down a tree or whatever it is, right? They're mostly apparent, but you're running around the map with this stupid Korok mask on in hopes that you won't miss one because you have to comb every inch of the map for these things. And it's like, what if there were less Koroks, but more meaningful interactions with them? Like instead of certain quest rewards that give you food or rupees or whatever, have them point me to a Korok location that has something interesting to do and like multiple different solutions on how to do it as the reward to a Korok. And let's say there's 30 Koroks in the game, but they're all a really interesting engagement instead of pick up rock or put board on roof, right? I'm overwhelmed by the amount of dumb minutia to do in the game instead of satisfying experiences to have. And the same's true for Booble Gems. Like caves, at first when you look at the cave system and you realize like how many there are, you're like, whoa, that's a ton of content. And then you do a dozen caves and you realize these are all pretty much the exact same thing. These are the lowest form of copy paste content. One note, one color, one feature. And now I have to do hundreds of these. Whoop-de-frickin' do. More baseless chores. And it's like people say that they added so much to the world because it's the original Breath of the Wild world, but you have the sky and you have the depths. I found the sky really satisfying, but the depths is more one color, one note nonsense that you're just down there farming zoanite over and over. And so that's something that I think just adding more and more piles of tiny little meaningless chores to do is not a satisfying Zelda revolution to me. It feels like a downgrade. I feel like I would enjoy romping through a more tight, satisfying 10-hour Zelda game than I would digesting Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom again. I don't know that I'll ever play Breath of the Wild again after the 2 times I've played it now. Whereas I've played Ocarina, I've played Wind Waker a dozen each just because they're fun to slam through and experience every time. I know there's people out there who have replayed Breath that many times, but that's just me. And at the end of all this discussion of satisfying currencies for upgrading things, I have to bring up the fact that they did introduce a currency for horse upgrades, right? There's this whole thing where you keep earning new horses, new horse armor, new horse features, all this stuff. Every time you go to an inn, you get horse points. And I think to myself, okay, there isn't satisfying currencies for upgrading other things that I really want to upgrade in the game, but we have this system for horse upgrades when it's a game where I never need to use the horse ever. Horses are completely meaningless in Tears of the Kingdom, yet they put this much energy into the horse system. I have a whole ass button dedicated to the horse that I never use because guess what? You have a hovercraft in this game, basically as early as you need it. Now, you might be starved for battery life here and there, but I guarantee you very quickly in this game, the horse is going bye-bye, at least in my humble opinion. So that's just another one of those tone-deaf areas where it's like they don't really know how to reward me. The one place where they are consistently tossing me rewards is the place I don't interact with the game at all. And my last point is the game already feels super dated. And what I mean by that is like every conversation, interaction, menu, etc. needs to happen through this like really restrictive conversation panel. I feel like I'm playing a MS-DOS RPG where if I want to go to an inn, I'm having a dialogue confirmation of like, do you want to stay? What type of bed? What time do you want to get up? It's tedious, and watching it, I remember it makes me think of like old Dragon Quest games or Earthbound of like, you're watching all this text go through and you're just smashing buttons to get through what you want instead of like walking up, you see a list of choices, you choose the one you want, you're in, right? That might be a little nitpicky, right? But it's especially apparent with like upgrading gear and how much of a tedious hassle that is. Any other game, you'd see a list of gear and you'd like see the items you need. Oh yeah, I have those. And it'd go boing, and your gear's upgraded. But no, I gotta watch a cutscene of someone kissing me and smash through the skip button and do. And, you know, do I know what items I need? No, I need to go talk to the fairy to even find out what I can and cannot upgrade, rather than the gear in my inventory telling me what the upgrade list is. And if I don't have an item to upgrade, I have to bug her to let me just see what I need to go farm for the things I want to upgrade. It's super tedious, and dang near every interaction in the game is like this, where the UI is this constrained button mashy thing of screaming at people to get the fuck out of the way from the game function that you need to do. And the fairy upgrade system, it could really use something to like track things you want to, and maybe even where to find them. I know a lot of people would consider that too handholdy for new Zelda, but really like I hate that assessment of just games that are being a little bit too purposely obtuse for immersion's sake. When the internet exists, they pretend like Google doesn't exist and doesn't have all the answers for you. And it's really this thing of like, oh, we're going to withhold it from the game to force people to be more explorative and immersed. And it's like, they're just going to go on Google. Whereas the alternative, if you had systems for tracking and finding things in the game and you wanted to be more immersed and not use them, you just don't use them, right? It feels dated in that respect. Also, post-production note, remember that thing I talked about with the horse having so much emphasis and being barely used in the game at all? Well, another aspect of the game's dated design is devoting an entire button to summoning the horse when you end up having this system of a squad of allies that you need to command them by physically running up to them, grabbing them, and then issuing their attack in some fashion. And I just think to myself, that button that I never use that's dedicated to the horse would be amazing to, on command, bring up a menu where I can select an ally and perform one of their attacks, especially considering the fact that I find myself regularly misinputting those commands from my allies or being unable to do them all together because I'm chasing the ally across the map, trying to get them to fucking link up with me. There's lots of instances of me blowing the loot I just fought enemies to acquire off a cliff because the Birdman decides he's going to run right into my fucking face the second I try to loot something. So, yeah, some more just incredibly bad design decisions of people thinking, yeah, we can't find a button anywhere on this controller for issuing commands to allies. Not like every other game where you have allied characters, there's a system for, giving them orders of how you'd like them to play, like Dragon's Dogma or Xenoblade Chronicles, for example. You have a button that says, wait here, go there, do that, right? No, you can't do that in this game. You have to physically run up to them, tap them on the shoulder and say, can you do your thing now, please? Yeah, stupid. Hate it. But hey, at least you got that horse button for that horse you never use. And as I mentioned with the caves, the underground, etc., it all feels really tacked on, uninspired. It feels like PS2 game design where there's just copy paste areas of, oh, well, we have this texture set, so we'll print it through the whole stupid cavern. We'll just keep going, right? Just make another cave because that's content, baby. Whereas it seems like open world games are ever so slightly trying to have more tailored experiences with the places you go. At least in my experience, I found umpteen caves that are just meaningless and uninteresting to me and provide the same gameplay loop of find a boulder, break the wall, oh no, there's monkeys down here. Or if I'm in the depths, just running past the same bland spore area, like that's all that is down there. There are no colors, shades, changes whatsoever. Maybe the lava area is a little bit different, but pretty much that's a whole world they made with one theme. Like, what if the original Breath of the Wild was just all desert or was just all forest and that was just the whole game? Like, would that fly? Yeah, that's kind of what they did here. They made a whole extra world that you have to traverse and deal with 100+ light trees to find. That's all one note, one thing, etc. In addition, there's also a lot of like boss refighting that goes on in the game where I'm thinking to myself when I first see this, it's like, oh, is this a hard mode version of the boss? No, it's just a regular version of the boss. So no upgrade or whatever, just redo the same fight you've already done. And your reward is a currency that you can just farm out in the wild yourself anyway. Nothing particularly special with that currency per se. Whereas if you made it a hard mode boss fight and they rewarded the same hearts that you get for killing bosses, that would be a way to fully fill out the heart meter, that thing that you can't do in this game while still using all your stamina. So that's a missed opportunity there. It's another dated design choice of like, oh, you just want to refight the boss 5 more times, right? The Demise, the big toe boss in Skyward Sword, just fight him 6 times, do a boss rush, kill all the bosses again for the top level reward. It's like, no, how are we changing this up? How is this different? It's a PS2 design choice of, well, we can just reprint the bosses again. I don't know, my opinion. my take on it. I don't like that as content. So yeah, to reiterate, I mean, I was looking forward to where Zelda was going after Breath of the Wild. I was like, what are they going to do next? And how is the world and the character and the combat and the capabilities of this game going to evolve in a way that was building on the blocks of what came before, to in the same way Zelda games of the past have. They seem to always kind of up the ante to the next one. And when I think about it, it's like, it seems like to me, the fuse system crippled any sort of interest I had in how the game was growing, because it no longer became this thing of me, the character, or the world changing in a satisfying way. It was just, there's a new mechanic and we're going to gimmick the shit out of it. And it's just going to be all you ever do to solve anything in this game. And it makes sense for it to be in lots of places, but it doesn't make sense for it to be the solution to damn near everything in a lot of cases. I like that they expanded the story a little bit. I like that they tried to do something new, but it can't be all there is. And I think about how past Zelda games, like, they had this huge sweeping thematic change to them that just completely evolved what you knew about the series. When we first did Ocarina of Time, we had the transition to 3D. Then we had Majora's Mask, which had the time mechanic. Then we had Wind Waker, which was the high seas, the having your own boat, this huge expansive world, which if you connect all the land masses, it's not that massive by comparison to the old days, but it was a revolution at the time. Twilight Princess had the changing of the Twilight Zone and the wolf mechanic. You know, it was pretty interesting, but none of those mechanics, while completely evolving the game experience, dominated the game to where that was all you were doing. And I often feel like Tears of the Kingdom is being dominated in a direction other than where I imagine Breath of the Wild could go next. And I don't know if they were just crippled by having to use the same world again and finding ways to make that interesting, but I just don't know that I'm interested for what's next in Zelda if it's going to be more of this, if it's going to be more kind of squishy, bullet spongy combat, sword spongy combat with some sort of gimmick that I have to perform chores in order to even approach my enemies, instead of just playing the game the way I used to back in the day. There was joy in getting a stronger Master Sword back in the day, because then, well, you got to use that Master Sword for more than 10 seconds. There was joy in getting new armor because I knew I'm not going to have to switch out to 14 different sets of armor to even exist in this area anymore. There was a joy in accomplishing things because the game wasn't like endlessly, heartlessly scaling to the point where, oh, well, there are enemies who are going to hit you for 17 hearts in one hit, so you're going to need to go farm hearts. Your health upgrades felt meaningful and important in old Zelda games. I think Tears of the Kingdom ended up doubling down on everything I liked least about Breath of the Wild, and none of the things that had really revolutionized about itself. It just introduced more goofy chores to things than embracing what they were really capable of with this massive open world and the ability to tell more stories and have more experiences in the expanded space they'd built for themselves. I found myself regularly disinterested in what was going on in the world in Tears of the Kingdom. When you don't have to build the world anymore, when it's there, ready for your next game's development, just to be tweaked, then we can start building these experiences to be more tailored and more exciting, and really didn't get that at all. When it comes down to it, I'll replay Link to the Past, Awakening, Ocarina, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight, even Skyward Sword a dozen times over before I think I'll ever be tempted to replay this game if I ever finish it in the first place. Because Tears of the Kingdom, in my life, is the first Zelda game that I feel like I cannot be bothered to beat, even a year later after it came out. Now, if you think I'm nuts, I'm a hater, a whiner, an idiot, I suck at games, I don't know what I'm doing, my opinion is terrible, feel free to let me know in the comments. I've seen enough reviews about Breath of the Wild being the greatest game ever made and how Tears of the Kingdom is the second coming to know that I'm probably going to get some hate comments in here. I'm probably going to get a lot of comments of people who never watched the video whatsoever and definitely haven't made it to this point. But if you did, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know how I'm wrong. I'd love for you to call me names. Make sure you leave a comment and increase those fat engagement numbers, my guy. With that, I'll say peace out. Have a good one. Love ya. Play games. Later.